Thanks very much for being with us, Ian Murray. Well, what the government is saying, and the Prime Minister said, and the Cabinet Office Minister said in response to an urgent question was, well, Suella Braverman made an error of judgment. She realised her mistake. She's acknowledged that. And basically, it's time to move on. Nothing to see here.
Well, the Home Secretary's job is an incredibly important job. She is actually in charge of security. She's in charge of the security services. She's in charge of policing in this country. She's broken the ministerial code. She's resigned and admitted she broke the ministerial code. And we had the Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street yesterday saying that he wanted to bring integrity and accountability and professionalism back to the heart of government. And his next act is to reappoint someone who resigned in disgrace only 6 days ago. This was not a reshuffle yesterday. This was a recycling of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss's cabinet. And really, the country deserved better than that. And I think it blows up immediately the fact that Rishi Sunak wants to do what's in the best interest of his party rather than what's in the best interest of the country.
In her resignation letter last week, she actually said it was a technical infringement, implying it wasn't really a big deal.
Well, why did she resign then, and why was it accepted? And I'm sure there'll be very few people in the Home Office this afternoon delighted by her reappointment. I'm sure the Permanent Secretary will be furious the fact that the Prime Minister has reappointed Suella Braverman to the post of Home Secretary, and it calls into question the Prime Minister's judgment at this very, very early stage. Less than 24 hours after he met His Majesty the King to take up the role as Prime Minister, he's reappointing someone who resigned last week for breaching national security. So I think the public out there will be asking these questions as well. And I think for the Prime Minister merely to bat this away as some kind of technicality shows that his judgment's in question as well.
He went on the attack against your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, saying Labour are soft on crime and in favour of unlimited immigration.
Well, it's just complete and utter nonsense. Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions. There's nobody with more experience in fighting crime and criminals in the House of Commons chamber than him. And I notice also that Rishi Sunak decided to say that we applaud the fact that he's brought in 15,000 new police officers. Well, they sacked 20,000 since they came into power in 2010. So if my arithmetic's right, we're 5,000 fewer than we were when this Tory government took on. He's back to the Boris Johnson agenda of PMQs, of just saying the first thing that comes into his head that might not necessarily be true. And I think if anybody wants to question Keir Starmer's integrity on crime, on fighting crime and putting criminals behind bars, then they're certainly on the wrong page.
It was quite a confident performance, though, wasn't it, by the new Prime Minister? Some people are saying, actually, he's going to be a bit more of a formidable opponent for Labour. Obviously, you know, with the Partygate allegations, Keir Starmer had a few open goals against Boris Johnson. With the disastrous mini-budget, a few open goals against Liz Truss. Maybe people are saying Rishi Sunak will be a tougher, more formidable opponent.
Well, he didn't ask any questions at Prime Minister's questions today, and the big ones that were asked of him in terms of what his own honesty, as he said he wanted to produce at Prime Minister's question, was about. He said in a video that's there for everyone to see that he wanted to take money off the most deprived areas and give it to the richest areas. He didn't answer that question. He lied about police officers in terms of the numbers on the streets. He's just back to the Boris Johnson playbook in that sense. He's got to answer questions at Prime Minister's questions. That's what it's all about. And until he does that, people will see through this as just another show from a man who doesn't have any ideas of how to take the country forward. He also should have apologised at Prime Minister's questions for the economic chaos and disaster that this Conservative Party's wrought in the country, that everyone will be affected by.
Do you think Labour have got a few questions to answer at the moment? People are saying we haven't got enough detail from Labour. Yes, we've heard about the windfall tax and so on, a few specific policies, but on the bigger questions of tax, will there be rises in tax? Will there be cuts in tax? Will there be spending cuts? Labour haven't answered some of those big questions on what you would do if you were in government.
Well, let me just say three very clear things, because this is a question that is asked of us all the time. The first thing is, the government have refused to produce any document that shows any of the figures of the consequences of the decisions they made in government over the last 3 years, let alone from this mini-budget. Until we see those, we're not even to make any judgments on the fact of what our tax and spend policies would be. Secondly, if we had produced a tax and spend budget, a shadow budget, if you like, just a few months ago, you'd be rightly asking me questions about that shadow budget that would have been out of date the very second it was published because of the chaos that's been wrought on the economy by this Conservative government. And the third thing is we've put together a huge number of policies that go right to the heart of this, dealing with this cost of living crisis, right to the heart of providing growth back into the economy, and right to the heart of bringing a fresh start for this country. And those policies we will continue to keep putting forward because they're in the national interest. But until we get any kind of figures from this government, we're not going to have any way of determining what needs to be done in the future.
And the government have moved their own economic statement from October the 31st to November the 17th. It's a full autumn statement. Was that the right decision, do you think, for the government, the new Prime Minister, to take a bit more time on that?
Well, they've crashed the economy. They've smashed the car off the cliff. It takes a long time to repair that car, get it off the beach and back onto the cliff again. That's what they've done for our economy. It's probably right that they take a bit more time to do this properly, because we can't afford any more Tory chaos in the economy or in the markets. But we'll wait and see what happens. They should have produced all of these figures, of course, from the Office of Budget Responsibility back with the mini budget, so we could have seen the consequence of it. That has wrought people in terms of the economy. And just to say, Ben, that people at home, in terms of when it is the publication of statistics and of all the figures and of the debt and the deficit, etc., they just need to look at their mortgage statements, their energy bills and the receipts they get from the supermarket, and they'll be thinking, what on earth is going on? And that's the people we need to be caring about and we need to be thinking about.
Ian Murray, good to have you with us. Thank you for your time today. Ian Murray, the Labour MP for Edinburgh South and the